Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey everyone, this is episode 358 of The Team House. I'm Jack, here with Dave, and our guest on tonight's show is retired General Remo Butler. Remo had an extensive career in Special Forces. He was the first Black Special Forces general. He started off his career in conventional forces, served with C-37 down in Panama more than once, and then went on to a number of different commands, commanded the Special Warfare Center, the deputy at USASOC, and commanded Special Operations Command South towards the end of his career. So there's a lot to talk about here. And Remo, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.
So your origin story, Remo, tell us about Egypt, Mississippi, and growing up as a young man.
Egypt, Mississippi. I was born in Egypt, Mississippi. Most people have never heard of Egypt, Mississippi. It's about 40 miles south of Tupelo. When I was a young child growing up there used to be a blinking yellow light. And the last time I went back, that blinking yellow light had been replaced by a 4-lane highway. So there's no sign or anything that says you're now entering Egypt. The only way I know where Egypt is because I'm related to most of the people that live in Egypt, Mississippi.
And so I'm picturing a small town, rural town in my mind.
It's not a town. It's a rural area. Bunch of houses out there. I think there was a gas station across the street by a blinking light. But that's all. I mean, we're talking real live, honest to God, small town America.
Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like you grew up around like a lot of like cousins, brothers, and things like that running around the wilderness over there.
Well, that's kind of true. I left Egypt when I was about 5 years old.
Okay.
And I told you earlier about me and my cousin were talking, and my wife and my son asked me about my past. And one of the vivid memories I have is we used to have hog killings once a year, every fall. And my grandparents had a big farm, and they had hogs, cows, pigs, everything. And all the family, the cousins, the uncles, the aunts, everybody would get together. Now, I was a kid back then, so us kids, we used it as playtime. We just had lost our minds, had a great time together. And the folks went out and they'd kill 2-3 big old hogs. And they had big, huge tables and cast iron pots to clean them. And they would take them and cut them up, butcher them. Unlike now, you take it to the butcher shop. They butchered themselves and put it in the smokehouse. And that was the meat for the winter.
Wow.
And, it was good. And I remember when I was little, I was about 3 years old. My grandmother had this butcher knife. To me, it looked like it was about 3 feet long. In reality, it probably was 6-8 inches. And my grandmama would give me that butcher knife and she'd tell me, she said, baby, go out to the smokehouse and cut grandma a piece of lean. And she would use that for seasoning the meat and whatever she was cooking. Well, I would go out there and I'd take that knife and I'd cut me a piece and I'd eat it. Then I'd cut a piece to take to her. And, so I really enjoyed that. It was a great childhood. We were in the country. We were country folks, but it was a great childhood.
And you were a third-generation soldier, right? Tell us about your dad and grandpa.
Yeah. Well, in reality, my father was my stepfather.
Okay.
And his father was in the military. His father was an E8, retired as an E8. And my father they lived in Texas. And during those days, there was not much for Black people to do in Texas. And he told me all the stories about him washing dishes and working in the arena during wrestling matches and so forth and so on. And he was in the military, and he was very proud to be in the military. He was a medic. And I asked him, I said, Dad, why did you become a medic? He said, I always wanted to be a doctor. He said, but my family couldn't afford to send me to school. So, I did the next best thing. I joined the military. His brother, who was smart, joined the Air Force. And, he taught me things, as a father does. You look at your father, and that's your hero. And I knew how hard he worked, how hard he studied, and he never had the give up mentality. And all those things just kind of bled off to me.
And so as you get older and you become a teenager and you're going through high school, are you already thinking about the military at this point?
No. Furthest thing from my mind. Vietnam was going on, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so military was furthest thing from my mind. The biggest thing that happened to me when I was a senior, junior or senior, West Point was making, all the military academies were making an effort to be more inclusive. So they were going out looking for students that met all the criteria, had the grades, who could get in. Well, I did. And one of my faculty members, or what do you call them, the principal or somebody from the school recommended me. So they came and they talked to me, and I was pretty excited about it. I was, oh, okay, West Point. It was me and two other guys. So we had all talked about it, and we were kind of excited. So the day we were supposed to go and meet a congressman from Kentucky because my father was stationed in Fort Campbell. We were supposed to meet this congressman from Kentucky, and he was going to be the one to recommend us to go to West Point. Well, I got up that morning and put on a suit, looked good, always looked good, but I looked real good this day. And my father, typical military guy, was up about 5:30, 6 o'clock, having his coffee. And he said to me, he said, boy, what are you all dressed up for? I said, well, Dad, today I'm going to meet this congressman from Kentucky, and he's going to recommend me for West Point. Father didn't say nothing for a minute. He looked at me, and he said, you're my son. I love you. I said, yep. He said, you won't like West Point. I said, really? He said, no. He said, you're not the kind of guy that goes to West Point. Stick with regular college. I went in my room, man. I took the coat and tie off, went to school. My other two friends were there wearing their coats and ties. And they said, hey, man. And I said, I'm not going. What do you mean? I said, well, my father told me that he didn't think I was cut out for West Point. And they were like, oh, okay. And one of them decided he wasn't going. The other one, the only way he had to go to college was going to West Point. And he went to West Point and he became a West Point officer. And at the end of the day, I can say this. My father made the right decision telling me that.
that it wouldn't have been a good fit for you.
Yeah. Back in those days, they did a lot of hazing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the one to sit around and take that.
And so what school did you end up going to?
I went to Austin Peay State University in Clarksville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And, it was great. And I had the privilege of going there. And this is one of the things that helped me more than anything. When I got there, Austin Peay had been integrated for 2 years. 2 years. And I remember when I checked in the dorm, it kind of amazed me how, all the black guys, we got black roommates. And one of the guys told me, he said, let me tell you what they do. He said, when you come in the dorm, they take a pencil. And if you're black, they take that pencil and put a dot by your name. So the next black person comes in, they look for a dot, and they put you all together as roommates. And I remember the football program, the coach, he was adamantly against it. But, he was forced. But he would only have X number of blacks on his team. And, that lasted for a couple of years. And then as time passed and those old people left, died, whatever happened to them, the school became more normal. And I said it helped me more than anything in my career because, one, minorities were a minority. We probably were 5% of the population when I went. Mm-hmm. So consequently, what do? You meet people. You get out of your comfort zone. You stretch out. You meet people. And I had to look up one time because I was starting to talk like this here. And, so you had to do that. And, I had some great friends, learned to drink moonshine with them. And I had some great things happen there. And I'll tell you one of the things that I was on the football team at Austin Peay. And this one guy came in, they called him Big Red. He said to me, and he was from Ohio, he said, hey, we're going over to this house for dinner. And it was just a regular house, but they served dinner. They cooked. I forgot there's a name for it, but I can't think of it. So we go in there, and, a bunch of us football players, probably about 5 or 6 of us. We walk in, and, you can feel the atmosphere change. And I looked around, but I was with, hey, 5 white guys on my team. We were going to eat. So the lady or the owner called Red over, looked at him, he said something, and Red said, lock down, we're leaving. So we all left, and I went, what happened? He said, he didn't want you in there because you was black. But those guys who were part of the team that I was on circled around me and would not let that stand. And that teaches you a lot about people.
Mm-hmm.
And that affects your judgment on people in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, it was a learning experience for me. And one of the things I tell my father, I said, I said, the good thing about that was when I went through ROTC and everything at Austin P, I had a lot of white friends. And when you come in the military, guess what the majority of the population was? White. Consequently, I already knew how to deal with y'all.
Hey guys, it's Jack. I want to tell you guys about the sponsor for today's show. It's Mando. Mando makes a whole series of male grooming products. They are unique in that they are a deodorant that you can use all over your body, on armpits if you like, but also wherever else you may deem necessary. And I have been using these products for about 3 months now. I've been using the body wash. It's bourbon leather. I've been using their bar of soap, which I really enjoyed, and also their deodorant. And so I exercise a lot and get very sweaty, so I need a deodorant that's going to do the job. And Mando has come through for me. The body wash was great. I actually used all of that. Need to reorder some more. But the bar of soap was also very cool. It was very smooth, actually. So I hope you guys will go and check them out. They have a starter kit that's up there, and they have a special deal for Team House viewers. So the starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code TEAMHOUSE at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. So you commissioned in, what was it, 1974?
1974.
And your first assignment was South Korea, a field artillery unit?
Camp Pelham, Korea, 1st and 15th Field Artillery, 105s.
Tell us about what that first Army experience was like.
It was the worst experience of my life. No, seriously. I got there, and it was one of those times when they had a bunch of new lieutenants. I think it was 3 or 4 new lieutenants came in, and they sent us to the units. And I got put in my battery. And, it doesn't take long. You've all been in the military. After a while, everybody understands what the real pecking order is. Who's good, who's okay, and who's not so good. And there was another guy there, and who happened to be a West Pointer, and we became great friends. And it was between me and him for 1 and 2. Today I'd be 1, tomorrow he'd be 1. It was that rivalry, but we enjoyed it. There was no animosity. And we had some other guys there, and everybody understood who was who, what was what. Well, during those days, we got what we called a 60-day OER, and they've stopped those. So the first day there in the unit, walked in, and they're getting an IG inspection. And back in those days, IG inspections made it or break you. So I was in there young, good looking, charming. And the IG said to the commander, he said, this is all messed up. Your arms room is messed up. Commander looked at me and he said, Lieutenant Butler, the arms room is yours. Got it. When Lieutenant said, your security's bad. Key control is messed up. My commander looked at me and he said, Lieutenant Butler, key control is yours. I didn't know. I was clueless. So we went through, and I think I took on about 3 or 4 things that they had failed. And I did business the only way I knew how, the way my father had taught me. I know I didn't know what was going on. I know I didn't understand the military, but I'm going to find out. So I did into a program. I, as they say, I did a deep dive into security, physical security, arms room security, maintenance, all that stuff. And I learned it. I learned it so well, I became the de facto battalion expert on it. So units would have problems, they'd call me in. So it was time after 2 or 3 months, we had a re-inspection. And out of all those things that we had failed, I had 2 minor deficiencies in the next one. So I felt good about that. Everybody's patting me on the back. Hey, you're this, you're that. And a little later, 60 days come up. We got our OER. Now remember, we're all new lieutenants. We're all friends. So we get our OERs in the orderly room, and we all run out back behind the orderly room, pull out our OERs. So my buddy, Mark, the West Pointer, pulls out his, and he got a 90 something, 190 something, whatever. But it was what he deserved during that time. A couple more guys came out, and they got what they deserved. And we had one guy who wasn't as good. He got an OER. I opened mine up. Mine was 1 point higher than the guy who was, so we just say jacked up. 1 point higher. So everybody's going, oh, no, this must be a mistake. It's got to be a mistake. But we're all lieutenants. We don't know. So the West Point lieutenant says, hey, we need to talk to the XO because this is obviously a mistake. So he went and got with the XO, and the XO came over and he looked at it. He said, boss made a mistake. This is a mistake. You need to go talk to the boss. So I grabbed my OER and I walk in, knock on the door, and he's sitting behind his desk. And he says, Lieutenant, what can I do for you? I said, sir, I'd like to talk about my OER. He looked at me and he said, I want to tell you something, Lieutenant. I spent a lot of time working on that OER for you. I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But we were looking at our OERs, and mine is just 1 point higher than Smuckatelli's. What do you mean? I said, we were out looking at, well, let me tell you something first, Lieutenant. Your OER is a private, personal thing. You don't share that with anyone. That's yours. You don't show it to anybody. You don't share it with anybody. I'm like, okay. And here it comes, drum roll. And he said, and I didn't give you that OER because you were black.
Okay.
And I said, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Now, remember, I'm a second lieutenant. I've been in the Army maybe 3 months. So I didn't know what to do. So there was a black captain there. And this was the time when black officers did not like to talk to younger black officers because they were afraid of what people would say. He called me in. He talked to me. He said, listen, he said, I knew this was going to happen. If you had worked for me, this is what I would have given you, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. But basically, I can't help you. Okay, I understood that. He had a career. Well, there was a captain there, Special Forces captain. He was the headquarters battery commander. So he called me over, showed it to him. We talked about it. And he was a great guy, very quiet, as they say, a man amongst men. And he says, no, this is not right. And he says, now let me tell you what you need to do. And he broke it down for me. He laid it out. He said, one, and this was back in the early 70s, and they had a thing called EO, equal opportunity. He said, you need to form a formal EO complaint. And I was a little concerned. I'm like, well, how will that affect me? And he's like, well, he's already stuck it to you. What else are he going to do to you? So I did it, filled it out, and I was surprised at the number of people that gave me statements. Some of my commander's friends pulled me to the side and said, listen, I hate that he did that to you. He shouldn't have did that, and I'll write a statement for you. Okay. So I got all these statements from other officers, and the battalion commander knew who I was because I had worked for him in helping to get all the arms rooms and the physical security squared away for the battalion. So one day, I'm out, helicopter lands. And during those days, a helicopter landing was a big deal. So I got a guy came by and said, sir, the colonel wants to see you. Okay. So I go up, and battalion commander's there with the Vardy commander. And he says, I got this EO complaint. And he asked me about it. And so I told him, just like I told you. And he said, well, I've talked to several officers here, and they all speak very highly of you and your knowledge. I said, well, that's good. He said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to take you down to, I believe it was Camp Davis at that time. I said, why? He said, I want to protect you from him. I said, well, sir, let me explain something to you. Number one, I don't run from anybody. It's not my nature. I said, I know what I've done, and I know what I can do. I want to stay here because I'm not going to run. And he looked at me, and he gave me that look like, you dumb SOB. And, he said, well, if you stay, I can't protect you. I said, I understand that. I said, but I'm willing to take that chance. And I'll tell you, this is what really, really got me one of the good things about it. Some of my commander's friends pulled me to the side and said, listen, we know what happened to you. And He's going to try to get you back. And if you make a mistake, he's going to crush you. But we're going to help you not make any mistakes. And they did. If they thought I was doing something wrong or whatever, they would pull me to the side and let me know what was going on. That's what society needs, people to help each other like that. So on one side, I'm having the worst time of my life. But on the other side, I'm meeting some great people. And this captain, who was Special Forces, he really, really helped me put together the packet, helped me work. There was on the DMZ, there was a company that I was the FO for. He was also a Special Forces captain out of Vietnam. These guys were super. They were down to earth, and if they said it, it was so. And I grew to respect them. So after his time was up, he changed command, he called me in, he gave me an OER. He said, I put a lot of thought in this, and I'm thinking to myself, you said that the last time, you moron. But anyway, he gave me my OER. It was not what I thought it should be, but it was very close. And I didn't feel I had grounds to fight. So I accepted it. But thanks to Captain Brady, he told me how to do, to reclaim the OER. And this guy told me something. He said, I based that on OERs last year. And the points were down much lower. So I put that in my paperwork. And it's still up there. I'm sure that's public record now. And the Army said, okay, based on what he told you and this OER, we're going to stamp on this, that this is based on an average of whatever, of 130. And so it overall, it didn't hurt me, but it taught me a lot about people. Now, I look at that same situation now. If I had had the knowledge then that I had now, my company commander, my battery commander would have been selling biscuits on the street because he'd been gone.
Yeah. And after that experience, you joined Special Forces in 1977?
Yep. I went to Fort Hood, Texas. I was finished with field artillery because I figured, this is a racist, and I'm sure there are other racists in field artillery. I want out. So I went to Fort Hood, Texas, and it's probably the best move I ever made because I had a battalion commander who was just tremendous. I had a company commander who was super. And they liked me. And the battalion commander had already designated me that I was going to be one of his company commanders. And, it was all great. We all had a good time, and I had, great lieutenants I was serving with, and it was just a great unit. 1st to the 5th Cav, Fort Hood, Texas. Just a great unit. And we got a new company commander. And guess what? He was Special Forces in Vietnam. And he was made from the same mold these other two Special Forces captains were. And I admired and respected him. And one day we're talking, and he says to me, he said, Remo, he said, you're the kind of guy that needs to be in Special Forces. And I said, well, how do I do it? He said, first you need to do a 4187. He said, go over to the S1 section and put out a 4187 for Special Forces, and I'll endorse it. I said, okay. I did it. I was in the motor pool about 2 weeks later, and I was in a 113 working on it. And one of the mechanics comes over and he says, sir, the colonel's down here and he's looking for you and he's mad. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? So I go and I see him. I say, hey, sir, how you doing? And he takes the 4187 and he holds it up like this. And he says, Remo, what the hell is this bullshit about you going to Special Forces? Yes, sir. Why? Well, sir, I met some guys in Special Forces. Like, He takes that 4187 in front of me, tears it up. And he says, Remo, you're a good officer. I'm going to make you a company commander. You don't need this bullshit. Special Forces will ruin your career. What do I say? Yes, sir. So I went back and I saw my company commander and I told him what happened. He went, ooh. He says, okay, this is what we're going to do. Notice what he said. We are going to do. He said, I got a friend that works in branch. I'm going to call him. And I want you to call him after I talk to him and tell him you want to go Special Forces and he'll make it so. I was like, oh, this is pretty easy. Okay. So he did it. And he said, okay, and gave me the number. I called up and he asked me a question. He said, can you swim? I said, yeah, I can swim. He said, okay, you'll have orders in the next couple months. Fortunately, my battalion commander had did a change of command. So I had a new battalion commander. And then I get orders going to Special Forces school. So I go to Fort Bragg and sign up for Special Forces. And let me tell you what, it's one of those things that you'll never forget. We started off with X number. After the PT test and a day, we had lost about 50% of the class.
And back in during that time frame in 1977, what was the Special Forces? I don't recall if they even called it the qualification course at that time. But what was that training pipeline like at the time?
It was called the Q course.
Okay.
The first part of it was extremely physical. In fact, during the first part of it, phase one, as they called it back then, I lost about 20 pounds. I mean, we were out humping. You were humping that big, heavy rucksack all through Camp McCall, the Uwharrie Forest, and there was not a swamp that I was not intimately familiar with. And when you did land navigation, you had to cross the swamp going out and cross the swamp coming back. It was purely a physical course. But it tested your desire, how much you really wanted to be in Special Forces. And during those time, they had a 7-day, 7-night trek where you were by yourself, just you and your rucksack and your food in the Uwharrie Forest. And in the evening, the cadre would come up to you and pull out his map, and he'd say, all right, you are here. Tomorrow, I will pick you up here at 6 o'clock in the morning. And you're talking 15, 20 kilometers cross country at night with a heavy ass ruck on. So yeah, you lost a lot of weight, but guess what? I made it. And I remember one night I was walking through and I saw a strobe light. You remember the strobe lights, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just blinking. So I said, oh, somebody's hurt. So I walked over and I saw this guy. He was laid back on a piece of wood, a log, had his feet propped up, had his rucksack, was eating some sea rations. And I said, hey, man, you all right? He said, yeah. I said, what's wrong? He said, nothing. He said, I just made a decision. I said, what's that? He said, tomorrow morning when it's light, I'm going to find the first road, and I'm going to sit on the side of the road until they pick me up. And that's the kind of course it was. If you didn't want to go to SF, you thought you wanted to be SF, that course told you that you didn't want to go SF. And at that course, I'll tell you, Colonel Charles Beckwith was in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Lieutenant Colonel Ola Mize was his deputy. And we had Major Big Budge Williams there. And let me tell you what, those guys didn't let you slide through. You earned it. And then phase two was what we call the classroom phase. And that's where you're learning all about Special Forces. And phase three was Robin Sage. And of course, when we graduated, they told us, they said, listen, you don't know jack about Special Forces right now. Yeah, you got a beret. Yeah, you're going to an assignment. So get in your mind that you don't know jack. When you get there, your first team is going to make you a Special Forces officer. And I left there, went to 3rd and 7th in Panama, and I had the best team sergeant you could possibly get, a guy named Ray Magsby. And when I walked into the team room, the guys were sitting around, it was about 3 o'clock. He told them, he said, y'all go get a cup of coffee. Now remember, I'm coming from the conventional army. We didn't do that in the conventional army. So I'm like, okay, what the hell's going on? So he sits down in his chair and he looks at me and he said, Lieutenant, like it was a bad word. He said, I want to welcome you to ODA 13. He said, just want to tell you, you don't know shit. Okay. He said, but we're going to teach you. He said, now, but I want you to make a decision. He said, I want you to tell me if you think you're going to run this team or you're going to let me, the team sergeant, run the team and educate you on how the team should be run. Well, to me, that seemed like a no-brainer. I looked at him and I said, Sergeant Magsby, I said, you're the team sergeant. I want you to continue doing what you're doing and teach me. And he said, all right. The rest of the guys came over. He introduced me to him and told him, he said, this is our new lieutenant, and we're going to make sure he's the best lieutenant in the unit. Time passed, and this is when we had RTEPs. You remember the RTEPs?
Mm-hmm.
And we'd had several RTEPs, and he was there with me, and we have an RTEP coming up. And I look up, and Sergeant Magsby's getting ready to go on leave. So I say, Sergeant Magsby, I said, that RTEP, and you're getting ready to go on leave. He looked at me and he said, Dowee, you can handle it. He said, and beside, I got Sid, I'm leaving with you, Dandy, Don, blah, blah, blah. And he said, they're going to make sure you pass, but you got it. I said, okay. Well, sure, lo and behold, we passed the RTEP. We did well. And those guys taught me about being special forces and about being a special forces officer. They built the foundation that I grew on.
I love that your team sergeant was yelling at you in Vietnamese.
Yeah, they all, all those guys were Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
And when I first went to my first unit, I remember there was one guy there who had spent 7 tours in Vietnam. Most of the guys on my team had spent multiple tours in Vietnam.
Hey guys, our show is sponsored by GhostBed. Check them out, please. They make awesome mattresses, awesome pillows, awesome bedding. GhostBed provides high quality and super comfortable award-winning mattresses crafted in the US and Canada. Did you know that 60% of US adults report being too hot when they're trying to sleep? That's me. I'm a sweaty little baby. That's why we designed all of our products with cooling features so you stay comfortable and asleep all night long. Pair any of our mattresses with GhostBed's award-winning adjustable base and get the ultimate sleep experience. GhostBed rules the family-owned business, 60,000 plus 5-star reviews. They have sleep experts on staff with 20 plus years of experience. So if you have any questions, you can hit them up and ask them, maybe what kind of mattresses work for you. 20 plus year warranty. That's 2 times the industry standard. Free shipping and returns on mattresses. Most of the products ship out within 24 hours. They have in-house customer support and sleep experts chilling in Plantation, Florida. It rules. It's the best. They give you 101 nights risk-free to make sure that these beds are right for you. If you don't like it after 101 nights, you can send it back, full refund. When you purchase a GhostBed mattress, your comfort guaranteed. I'm reading it right now, and it's capital letters, guaranteed. Okay? They do the right thing, and they're a great company. If you're not sure which GhostBed's right for you, like I said before, you could take their mattress quiz online, or you can give a call to one of their sleep experts, and they'll help you with exactly what you possibly could need, what works for you and what doesn't. And the best news about this is, Team House listeners and viewers, you get an extra 10% off site-wide for a limited time. You just go to ghostbed.com/house and use the code HOUSE at checkout. One more time, that's ghostbed.com/house with the code HOUSE, HOUSE, at checkout for an extra 10% off site-wide. I want to thank GhostBed for their continued support. I want to thank all the fans that listen and watch for their continued support. Without you guys, we are nothing. So thank you for supporting the show, and thank you for supporting the companies that help support the show. ghostbed.com/house for 10% off. Made in the US, made in Canada. Shout out to our brothers in Canada. They rock. Check them out. I love GhostBed. Thanks, guys.
So, 3-7 down in Panama, everyone I speak to kind of describes it as this sort of like glorious paradise, the best time of their life. What was your experience like that down there as you kind of ingratiated yourself with your team and, you start coming through the ranks?
It was great. For me, it was a learning experience, but it was a great learning experience because they believe in working hard. And as some of the guys on the team said, and partying hard. and they put the work in. They put the serious work in. But when they were off duty, they enjoyed Panama because how often do you get to go to a paradise?
Yeah.
And the thing about it then, your team was your de facto family. I knew every guy on my team. I knew his wife, and I knew their kids. And they knew my wife, and they knew my kids. Every weekend, we usually did something as a team together, whether it was go to the beach, meet at somebody's house, and cook out, fish, whatever, but it was a team effort. And I think that's one of the things that Special Forces has lost over the time, is that a team family.
Mm-hmm. Any other, before we move on to the next thing, any particular experiences down in Panama? 1977 is a little bit before the counter-narco stuff, I think.
Yeah,
so it was more counter-Marxism that you were focused on, right?
It was. We worked with the Panamanian Defense Force back then. We sent some MTTs to different places, but mostly it was in local training we did.
Mm-hmm. Working with the PDF.
Yeah,
And so a couple of years later, 1980, you're off to Fort Benning.
right.
What did you do there?
I went to the advanced course. Spent a year in the advanced course, and when I left, uh, it was time for me to have a company command, and they sent me to a unit called ITG, Infantry Training Group. And everything that I had read or knew about the military then was that you needed to have a TO&E
Mhm.
company command. This was TDA company command. And I will say this: I had never seen so many black commanders as I had when I was out working with the with the training group, infantry training group, and the basic training unit there. Um, I'm not saying it was an accident. I'm not saying it wasn't an accident, but that's the way it happened. I was very fortunate. I met a guy there who was my commander named Sid Shacknow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, concentration camp survivor and the best leader I've ever encountered in my life.
Wow.
So we got there, and you know, he didn't say much. He just kind of walked around and looked. But he identified me as one of the players. Him and his wife took it upon themselves to start mentoring me and my wife for the future. And I commanded, and I did a good job for him, and I was rewarded, my OERs and so forth. And it was time for me to leave, and I could have went to Fort Benning to the as they call it, bedroom 4. Had one of those soft jobs there, air conditioned. And he came to me and he said, "Listen, Captain Butler," he said, "I'm having some problems with my motor pool, and I know you're changing command. You're going to leave. I'd like you to stay on and be my motor officer." And I was kind of like, be out here in Harmony Church as a motor officer or Building 4. And I said, "Okay, sir." He said, "Now, I know you don't know anything about vehicles." He said, "But I'm going to send you to the motor officer school." And he said, "Now, in saying that," he said, "I'm probably going back to Fort Bragg. They're starting USASOC there, and I'm going to be the first chief of staff. And I'll get you back." I was sold. I was going. I said, "Okay." Went and ran the motor pool, did a tremendous job at the motor pool, had some tremendous people that worked for me, had a motor sergeant. And this was back in 1982. And I still communicate with this guy today, Master Sergeant Bill Friend. Great guy. I mean, he taught me everything you wanted to know about a wheel vehicle or a track vehicle because he knew it. And he was a great guy. Well, I did it, finished. And right about the time I'm finishing my tour, I get orders for Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And that's where I went. And guess who I was working for?
Sid
Colonel
Shatnow.
Shatnow.
So that's what, around 1984 that you're back to Special Forces?
Yeah. Yep.
And so where did Mr. Shatnow set you up?
I worked for him. He had me there, and I set up he had a conference, a commander's conference. And of course, he naturally sent me back to Fort Benning to prepare the commander's conference for it. So I did the commander's conference. All the commanders came. And if you ever have to prepare a commander's conference, it's not fun. But anyway, I did it, went back to Fort Bragg. And about the time I was there, I got moved to 1st Battalion, 7th Special Forces Group as the 3. And we were getting ready to start this program where every 6 weeks we would go down to Honduras and spend 6 weeks, come back, spend 6 weeks, go back to Honduras. And it was called, I forgot the name of it. But anyway, it was a big exercise. And being a 3, moving all those people back and forth, it was taxing. But I did it, and I survived it.
This is when 7th Group is getting involved in like the Contra Wars down in Central America.
Yes, it was.
I'd love to pick your brain a little bit. I mean, what was your impression of that conflict and sort of the Special Forces mission down there?
Well, I'm trying to phrase this the right way because, as you know, a lot of that stuff is still classified. I would just say this: we were influential in the training of the Contras, but not only the Contras. We were influential in the training of the Honduran military because the Honduran military served as a blocking force to keep the Contras out of Honduras and out of El Salvador. And we also worked with the Salvadorian army. And, at that time, there were a lot of guerrilla forces going on down there. So we were teaching them, guerrilla warfare, how to beat them. It wasn't hard for us, but for them coming from the culture that they came from, it was difficult. But I think at the end of the day, we did a pretty good job.
And then you took command. You went back down to the C-37, right?
No,
Oh,
no. I took over Charlie Company 227.
Okay.
Yeah, Charlie 27.
Cool. So tell us about your company commander time in SF.
That was me. I was company commander.
Yeah. And this was Fort Bragg rather than Panama,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I imagine it was more of this preparing, what, like you're saying, every 6 weeks for these missions down to Honduras.
Yeah, we were doing a lot of missions in Central and South America during that time, and we were always busy going somewhere, getting ready to go somewhere, and the guys loved it. When an SF soldier is traveling on an MTT or TDY, he's happy. He's just happy, and we enjoyed it. Had a great unit, and we did a lot of different things.
Care to describe any, Remo? It's all right.
I guess I could say this one.
Sure.
I was the first one, I think, to work with my company was the first one to work with the Contras.
Mm-hmm. That must have been a pretty interesting experience to, your team, Americans and probably some Latinos on your team, I imagine, a seventh group.
Yeah, it was different back then because we all supposed to spoke a little bit of Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And traditionally we would take, we had a bunch of Latinos from seventh group. We had Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and Cubans and everybody was there. So their job was also to teach us Spanish. And I remember we went there and we worked with them one time for about 6 months, I think. And we came back and we had to take Spanish tests. And everybody's expecting our Spanish to be off the charts. It wasn't. Why? Because the people we were working with were mostly undereducated or uneducated, and we spoke like they did. Yeah, so we spoke colloquial Spanish.
Yeah, not Spain Spanish.
Not Castellano.
Yeah. And then 1988, you get position J3 at Special Operations Command South.
At SOC South, yes, I did.
Yeah.
I was fortunate because my 3rd Battalion commander, Colonel Chuck Fry,
was
the commander. Yeah. So when I went down there, it was like old home week again. And I went in and held that position. I was only a major, a fairly new major. And I held that position down. And then finally, Dave Wilderman, we called him the Beast. He was an 05. He came in, and I became his Deputy 3.
And this is sort of like in the run-up to Operation Just Cause, right?
Yes, it was.
Can you talk to us about like the situation in Panama deteriorating?
The situation was going down. And I guess we weren't really getting a lot of good, solid guidance. And when that guy got killed that night, that was the first thing. He got killed.
Are you talking about the checkpoint that there's a soldier that got killed?
Yeah. People started to wake up and take notice. So from that, we had meetings with all of the players. And it was decided upon that we needed to do something. So at that point in time, we started working on Operation Blue Spoon, as it was called. And that was the invasion of Panama. And we planned for it, rehearsed for it, rehearsed for it, and finally executed it. And, it's hard to say, but it came off pretty flawless. There were some mistakes, some accidents, but it was a good plan and it worked.
What was your experience like on D-Day and H-Hour when all of that went down?
During that period of time, I was working with, I was moved to another mission unit, and we worked out of Howard Air Force Base, out of one of the hangars. And So I'm working with professional guys, and we're doing our jobs and monitoring the situation
Mhm.
and mitigating risks as best we can.
Mhm. I mean, I think that was the largest airborne operation we did since World War II for
Yep.
sure.
I mean, we had 82nd Airborne jump, Rangers jumped in.
And obviously, Manuel Noriega was
Yeah. At the
removed
Comandancia.
from power.
Mhm.
And what was sort of the aftermath on your end after
Well,
the con?
well, and I'll say it's one of the things we didn't do real well was plan for the after.
Mm,
So you had a lot of people kind of running around doing their own things. And it was a time where we used civil affairs and psyops, and they came in and they helped tamp down the protests and figured out the right message to send to the Panamanians. Now one thing about it I got to tell you because it's kind of humorous.
yeah.
Planning. It doesn't matter how well you plan. There was a place called Defy, and it was north part of Panama. And the commander of the unit there he was a hardcore guy. So we loaded a mission up with a bunch of guys on helicopters, headed up there to take it over. And he told them on the way up, said, listen, all the weapons should be stacked up at the north end of the runway. If that's the case, you guys will land, go in, take control. If there aren't weapons there or they're stacked up on the other end, you got to go in hot. Well, some kind of way, we had a team already up there, got confused. And now they don't, it's backward. So the helicopters that are flying up there, loaded for bear, will be going in hot. But we wanted them going in cold. So what they had to do, we had to launch a helicopter from Howard Air Force Base, flying at Mach 1 because we couldn't get commo with the guys. So this helicopter had to fly at Mach 1 to get within range of the helicopters and tell them, hey, don't go in hot. Don't go in hot. It's all taken care of. But those things happen. It's called the fog of war.
Yeah.
But we handled it.
Yeah, deconfliction.
Uh-huh.
And then we get to what was it, about 1991? You did some instructor time.
Yeah, I was trying to get back to Fort Bragg because I consider myself an action guy. I wanted to be where the action was, and I went to Fort Bragg, and I saw some old friends of mine there, and they said, "Oh yeah, we can use you." Well, Branch said no, and Branch was punishing me because I was supposed to go on a fellowship to, I think, Harvard or something for one of those schools, and I didn't want to go. So I did something else. I got extended in Panama for another year. So since I came back to Bragg, Branch was making sure that no, I wasn't going to do that. And they sent me up to the Armed Forces Staff College, to be an instructor. And it was great. I'll tell you why it was great, because it gave me time to decompress for a year.
Mhm.
Remember, I've been burning the candle at both ends
Sure.
for years. So now I got a chance to decompress, go to the gym, lift some weights, hang out, drink a beer or two or some scotch. And it was good. I didn't realize it, but it was a blessing in disguise.
Mhm. And was it around this time, maybe it was a few years prior, that Special Forces became a branch for officers?
1987 or 85, we became a branch.
Okay. And so did that impact your career at all about getting moved in and out of Special Forces?
Yes, it did. It made it better because I didn't have to worry about going to the infantry side. I stayed with Special Forces, and it didn't hurt me.
Oh, I see. And so the next stop for you was commanding 1st Battalion, 7th Special Forces Group.
Yep.
What was your battalion command like?
Oh, man, it was tremendous. I had some great officers working around me. I had good team leaders. In fact, I'll tell you who one of my team leaders was. His last name is Fenton.
Brian Fenton?
Yep. And, back in those days, we identified Brian as a go-getter. And immediately, he did his team time. And what did you do to good guys? Once they finish their team time, you bring them up to the 3 shop. He wasn't happy, but, it was great for him. And like I said, I had a great command sergeant major named Rich Tudor. And let me tell you what, that was the most loyal, hard-working guy you could run into. So I was fortunate.
And operationally, I'd be curious to ask you, how had the operational environment in South and Central America changed for 7th Group from, you started off in the 70s into
Yeah.
the 80s, and now we're in the early to mid 90s.
We had gotten what we call mission creep.
Mm.
We had went from doing some local training to we were actually working counter drug up in Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, all those places. We had camps set up. Our guys were working MTTs, working with DEA, and we were tremendously busy. We were always busy, and it was good because it kept the guys were on edge.
Yeah, and it gave them something to do too. I mean,
Exactly.
there wasn't a lot happening at that time
No.
other than
Yes,
the
during
Gulf
that time,
War, but
Salvador was kicking up, Honduras, Nicaragua. We had people in Costa Rica, all over Central and South America. We had teams.
they kept you guys busy. How did you kind of round out your command time at 1st Battalion? How did that wrap up?
God, I wish I could tell you. I don't remember, but we were doing stuff, and we were having fun in doing it. And I couldn't tell you the last mission that we did, but we did something.
I believe you. And from there, they put you up as the Chief of Staff at Special Forces Command.
Oh God. Yeah, that was before I went to the War College. Yeah.
Okay. And so was SF Command relatively new at this time, or had it been around? It was.
The whole system was new at this time.
Yeah.
Remember, we just became a branch.
So tell us a little bit about SF Command and kind of like how it was going through that growing experience at the time.
It was, as you say, a growing experience. Everybody was trying to find their lane.
Mm.
Remember, this was the first time this was ever done. So everybody's trying to find their lane. And the big part was, how much control did SF Command want to exert on the groups? SF Command, was the next level up from the group commands. So how do they exercise their command without trying to take over?
Right. How did they end up delineating that? Like what those lanes are?
Well, it came out pretty good. They delineated it with the help of the command sergeant majors and some of the general officers that were there. And they kind of laid out, okay, these guys should do this, and this group should do this. And they put everyone in the lane. And sometimes it worked out perfectly. Other times you had to make changes.
Mm-hmm.
So the flexibility was the key.
Also I should ask you, because this is sort of I think a bit of a theme through your career. From point A to point B, how are you seeing the Army itself change? Where integration was kind of new, well, I shouldn't say that. In the Army, integration wasn't new, but some of these things, black soldiers coming into some of these higher officer positions, was it more of a new thing? How are you seeing the Army change?
Well, the Army was changing a little bit because when I was in Fort Bragg, I was there serving with, at the time when I was a group commander, there were 2 black brigade commanders in the 82nd. And the COSCOM commander was black. So, yeah. But in SF, remember, we've never had a lot of black officers in SF.
Mm-hmm. And then you were off to the Command and Staff College?
No, War College.
War College, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And where was that at?
Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
How'd you like it out there?
It was okay. It just got cold and a lot of snow in the winter. And being a South America kind of guy, I wasn't used to that.
Was that another kind of like period of rest for you and your family a bit? Yeah. Because after that, they had you as the SWCC commander, the Special Warfare Center commander.
Before that, I went to the 18th Airborne Corps for about 6-7 months as the SOCORD, Special Ops Coordination Officer.
Oh, okay,
and
cool.
I worked with 18th Airborne Corps on some of their exercises and so forth. And
so then, now you're kind of getting to see like the big machine and how it really works.
Yeah. And I was already on the the 06 command list. So I was just kind of waiting for, my command to come out.
And so SWIC commander, what was that, like 1997 or 8?
1998.
1998.
Yeah, 98.
There were some interesting things happening at SWIC at that time too, that you guys were like, well, Sephardic had already been stood up.
Yeah.
Cephalic started to come around towards the tail end of that time, maybe. But what was going on, like training wise in SF at that time? How were you seeing that change?
Well, it was a transitional period, and I'll tell you why. In SF we have what I call the keepers of the tab. I went through the last hard Q course, those guys, and soldiers were different. We weren't getting as many combat arms guys to come into SF, and we were getting quartermasters, medics, whatever. You take an infantry guy, put him on land nav course, he can probably do it. You take a quartermaster guy or a medic and put him on a land nav course, it might be a little harder for him. So we had to look at how we were training. And, General Tagny used to tell me, you're in charge of training. You know how to train, figure it out. So we started looking at some of the things we did during training. And one of the ones that we looked at was land navigation. Why did we have such a huge land navigation failure? Well, when you got guys who don't land navigate regular, it's hard to teach them. But again, I'm going to ask you this question because you were an SF guy. How often did you go out in the middle of the woods looking for a stick?
I mean, not often.
Yeah, you did. That wasn't a mission.
Yeah.
But that's what we had these students trying to do. Go out in the middle of that swamp and find a stick. Did it make sense? Well, I had some good old retired sergeant majors that liked to talk to me. And, one of them said to me, sir, I spent this many years in SF. I've had 8 tours in Vietnam. I never had to find a stick in the middle of the woods. He didn't say it that nicely, but that's what he meant. So we looked at what we were teaching and how we were teaching it. Normally, when you're looking for something, it's a major land feature, a road intersection. Let's not forget the church or a main highway. So we started looking at changing our course to incorporate common sense into how we were teaching these students. Not lowering the standards, but teaching with common sense. And we started doing that, and our pass rate went from like 42% to 45%, which is not high. But you look at that and you say, that's putting 6 more guys a year in SF on a team. So that's how we kind of looked at that. And we always had to be thinking of innovative ways to train. Because, you keep doing it the same way over and over again, all you do is do the same thing over and over again. So we looked at things, how to modernize training, how to update training. And I was very fortunate because like at SWIC at that time, we had a lot of retired sergeant majors working there for me. And let me tell you, those guys were not shy about giving you advice.
Were any other major training changes that you recall from that time frame?
There was one, swim test. Remember I told you when the guy called me up, he said, "Can you swim?" I said, "Yeah." Well, I'd go to the first day of training, and there'd be 500-600 guys there. And some of the guys looked like they were born and raised inside a gym, and they'd knock out the PT test. Well, a lot of guys didn't knock it out, so they were already gone. And these guys, like I said, looked like they were born in a gym. And they put them in the pool, and you know where they went? Straight to the bottom.
Yeah.
So me and my sergeant major looked at it and talked about it. He said, you know what? A lot of these guys would be good SF soldiers. Now, the majority of them were minorities. And we said, yeah, well, how can we fix this? So we talked about it. A lot of folks did a lot of looking. We talked about it. We came up with a concept. If you make it through selection, and we didn't flunk you for the swim test, and you made it through selection, which we were only like a 40-some% pass rate, remember that, we will bring you back 2 or 3 weeks early, teach you how to swim. Once you learn how to swim, you start like everybody else. You get in the pool, you do that 100-meter swim. And it wasn't a lot, But we figured that every year we were putting about a split A team back into the force because of these guys who would have been gone.
Right.
And now they were here. Now,
Yeah,
when you talk to people about a split A team, that's 6 guys. In the macro sense, that's not many. But when you're talking about an A team, and each company got 6 teams, and you got 2 teams that are 3/4 strength and 1 team is less, yeah, those 6 people make a difference.
Yeah. Remo, out of curiosity, because there's always been talk about whether the swim test was intentionally like racist. If the point was like, do you believe that the swim test is a functional part of
Well,
that?
I'm going to go back to the first story I told about Sergeant Major in Panama, who said, when they were looking for SF guys, all they wanted you to do was be able to squeeze that trigger.
Right.
And there were several of those when I went to 3rd or the 7th in Panama. We had several guys who couldn't swim. And they mostly retired as command sergeant majors in special forces. So I think that answers the question.
Yeah.
And from there, you became the deputy at USASOC.
Yeah,
How did you like that job?
it sucked. The good thing about it, I worked for General Tagney. And I don't know if you know General Tagney, but he's a great guy. And he's a funny guy, too. People wouldn't realize, but he's a funny guy. And yeah, I was there, put in my time, and learned a lot. And, one thing General Tagney was good about, he'd call me over and he'd say, "Hey, Remo, come here." "Yes, sir." "I'm supposed to go to this event tonight." "Yes, sir. You're going." But, working with General Tagney was fun for me. And he was a great guy. He was a great mentor. And I just enjoyed working for him.
But the job itself, you didn't really like the staff office aspect?
Find a combat arms officer who's a warfighter who likes staff jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And so by this time, around this time frame, are you also getting looked at to pin a star on?
When I became his chief of staff, I was already on the list.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us how that came about, because, as you mentioned, you were the first Black Special Forces general.
Like I said, I always took the hard jobs. Somebody told me that. Take the hard jobs. I always took the hard jobs. And my resume stood on its own. And all I said, if somebody gives me a fair chance, who knows? Even saying that, I didn't believe that. Because number one, I had a mustache. And, people would talk to me about general. I said, I'll never make general, never make general. And I was at the gym one day, and there was another general officer there, a friend of mine, and we're just chewing the proverbial fat. And he says, "Yeah, Remo, I'm leaving. I'm going here and here, and you're going to replace me." And I'm thinking to myself, no, that's a general slot, and I'm not replacing you. And, we considered the conversation. And then I started hearing the rumors later on that I was on the GO list. And finally, somebody let the cat out the bag and told me. So there was nobody more shocked than me. My father knew I was, a good officer. But for him, he thought the epitome of my career would be me going to the War College. And for me to invite him down, and then my mother to pin on my star, that was it. That was it for me.
Your dad, who was a retired sergeant major.
He was a retired command sergeant major.
Yeah. What about what year did your dad join the Army?
God, I couldn't tell you. I was in the early 50s, I think.
Yeah.
1950.
Yeah. That's such a tremendous amount of change that the entire country, much less the Army, went through during that time frame. Okay. And so the position you did take, you became the commander of Special Operations Command South.
Right.
So you're the man in charge now. And, as we've talked about through all of these progressively, more responsible positions that you took throughout your Special Forces career. And now you're kind of the Special Ops commander in charge of the region. What was that experience like?
It was a tremendous experience because one, South America and Central America belonged to me. We had troops almost in every country. And I used the opportunity to go and visit, talk to them, meet all the ambassadors. And I established rapport with all the ambassadors I met. Some of them we became personal friends. And then there was the ambassador to Colombia, Ambassador Patterson. She was a great lady.
Yeah, she's nice.
when the airplane got shot down and the people were taken as hostage, it was during Black History Month. And I was in, I want to say El Paso, giving a speech. And me and my aide were on the plane, and he says to me, he said, "Sir," he said, "this is what happened in Colombia, and the ambassador wants to talk to you." We're on a plane. I said, "Okay, well, tell them to let her know. I'll call her when I get to Puerto Rico." And I said, "Okay." So we fly back to Puerto Rico, and I arrived late, and they ambushed me. My unit was there. SOC South was there. My staff was there. And they said, "Sir, we got a C-130 on the runway waiting for you. Smuckatelli has been to your house and packed your luggage, and you're going to Colombia." So we fly out, get to Colombia. Ambassador Patterson briefs me what's going on. And it's one of those things where nobody really knew what was going on. So we had to get there. I had a good staff with me, and we started looking for him. The thing that we made the most inroads with was the Colombian government. And I got to work with and for President Uribe, which was a pleasure. And I worked with the General Ospina, who became the commander of the Colombian military. These were some great people. And our job was not to take over the mission, but to assist them in doing the mission. And that's what we did. And of course, a couple of years later, came to fruition. They rescued everybody. But the Colombian military was tremendous to work for. The people there were tremendous. And I just totally enjoyed working with that group. And Ambassador Patterson at the embassy, I mean, there's not enough I can say about her.
Just to clarify for our viewers, Remo, you're talking about the 4 American contractors. They had a counter-narco mission, taking pictures of the drug plants, and they got shot down by FARC, crash landed, and the pilot, the pilot was executed on the ground, and the others were taken hostage.
Right. That's correct.
About how long was it after the crash that you guys got boots on the ground?
About a day.
Yeah. Because it was out in bad guy land too, right?
Yeah, definitely was.
Yeah. Anything else you recall from those they must have been some frantic days, busy days, long days, as you guys were trying to get up to speed and try to identify what happened.
All the days were frantic. They started early and they ended up late.
Mm.
And the issue is this: you have Americans, but they're in a sovereign country of Colombia. How do you go to get them back without trying to take over Colombia? So it was a political game.
Sure.
And like I said, you learn to work with people. You assisted where you could. And when they said, "Okay, we got this," you had to be smart enough to back off, but observe what was going on.
Mm. That was the challenge of that mission. Yeah. Anything else happened while you were the SOC South commander that you'd like to talk about?
I spent 3 years there as commander of SOC South. And we did a lot of things there. One of the things that I really liked was when we did Cabanas with the Argentinians.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And we had 6 or 7 different countries working with us. And, it was a great opportunity for them to know us and for us to know them. And, different years later, I'd be traveling through South or Central America, and I'd always have somebody come up to me and say, "Mi general, you don't remember me, but I was this when you were there at Cabanas." And, that's always good.
Anything else from SOC South?
No, it was just it was a great time.
So tell us a little bit about retirement. You went all the way up to general. How did retirement come about, and how did you feel about that personally?
I was the chief of staff of SOCOM. I had the pleasure of working for General Brown and Admiral Olson. So it was good. But having spent all that time in SF, having over 300 jumps, having carried a heavy rucksack for many, many years, my body was breaking down. At that time, I had 5 knee surgeries.
Oof.
General Brown had this thing. Once a month, he would do a unit run, about 3 miles. And as the chief of staff, my job was to be on the unit run, and finish up front. And I like to lead from the front because that's where leaders are, in the front. But every time we do that for the next week, I'd be in my office, icing my knees, icing everything, taking a Tylenol, and my body was wearing out. And, I spoke to General Brown about it, and he, oh, you got it, you can do this. And people were talking to me about the next general officer promotion to Major General. And, anytime somebody talks to you about promotion, it excites you. But then I thought about my body, and I said, you know what? If I did it and I took it, that would be 3 more years that I'd be killing myself. And I decided that I couldn't do it no more, and I was going to retire.
And Remo, I should point out, because we didn't talk about it earlier, that like you were a big time gym guy at the back in the day. And I've like met guys who were like a Navy SEAL in the 1980s, and like they will mention your name, like, oh yeah, Remo Butler could bench press 400 pounds. Like,
yeah. And in fact, in Puerto Rico, I had a SEAL platoon with me. And one of the things I used to do was once a month, them guys would do this crazy run and crazy swim. And I was right there with them. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, I'd do it and I'd suck pond water for the next week. So anyway, when it got to SOCOM, the same thing was happening. And, I decided, I said, you know what, I can't do this. Ego says, take the promotion.
Yeah.
But my mind said no. So I started putting my name out there that I was going to retire, and companies started calling me and saying, when you put your paperwork in, call us. Let us know. And I became retirement eligible on 1 February. I had time and grade 1 February 2004. 2 February 2004, I submitted my retirement paperwork. And, a lot of people were against it. People were telling me, oh, you still got a lot to offer. We got plans, so forth. And that's fine. But what about what I want? Mm-hmm. What about me? What about my health? So I retired, and a week after I retired and took terminal leave, I was in Kuwait working for Halliburton. And I stayed there, and I came back at the end of June to have my official retirement ceremony at SOCOM. And I went back and I spent the next 2.5 years in Iraq working for, at that time, Halliburton, which changed over to KBR. And, it just found me a niche in the contractor side of the world.
You were working like logistics?
That's all Halliburton was, and KBR was logistics. Mm-hmm. And I used to tell people, from the moment you wake up in the morning and go in the bathroom and use the bathroom to the time you turn your light off at night, everything that has touched you during the day has came from KBR. All the meals you've eaten, the gas you've used, the air conditioner that you have, the fans, the electricity, everything. We provided everything.
And you did that for, you said 2 or 3 years?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. And then what did you get into after that?
Oh, man, I left KBR. Well, no, before I left KBR, I did that. I came back to the States, and they made me the business development guy at here in Tampa. I finished that up, and I think I went to work for a company called SOC. It's a security company. I worked with them for about a year and a half, and then I worked for Honeywell for a little while. Then I went back to SOC, and I just worked for a lot of different companies in the Mideast and the U.S. consulting and so forth. And I enjoyed it because it gives you a different perspective.
What was that perspective as opposed to being an Army officer?
Well, from being a general, everything is catered to you. But when you go out as a consultant, everything is not catered to you, and you have to do the nug work yourself. Mm-hmm. And the other part was this. The biggest one was this. When you get out of SF as people are different. If you tell an SF guy, I want you to put a coat of paint on that building for me. When you come back, that building is going to have 3 coats of paint on it, new windows, new doors, etc. You tell a civilian guy, I want you to put a coat of paint on that building, you might get a coat of paint. Mm. And you have to learn who you have to watch out for, what they're going to do. And everybody, like I said, I love hiring military people because they would go above and beyond what was expected.
Was the transition difficult from, retiring? No.
Very easy.
And
real quick though, Remo, I want to ask because you mentioned sort of, your enlisted personnel really kind of, teaching you and boosting you up. And also your fellow officers and sometimes even senior officers with the camaraderie, the mentorship and things like that. And, and that is something that's very different, I think, in the military often than the civilian world. But also in the military, like I was never in SF, but in Ranger Battalion, you would have like young lieutenants come in, and some of them are like, I'm here to make my career, right? My first tour as my PL. So they would drive and drive and drive without listening to the platoon sergeant, whatever. And then there were other ones who you knew were really on your side. And it was often like somebody had to pull these officers aside and say, look, these guys will make you look good if you help them. But if you come down on them all the time, what you think you're doing is actually going to be the opposite of what you want to be done. How was that, like learning to, or you obviously seem to have a knack for it, but I'm sure you've seen officers who didn't really know how to work with their enlisted before.
Yes, I have. And I used to tell my team leaders when they came in for their team leader briefing, I'd say, listen, bud, you don't know jack about SF. And of course, they'd look at you with that shocked look on their face. And I'd say, your team sergeant, and I'd tell them who their team sergeant was, he has this experience, and I'd read it out for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done this, this, and this. And this guy, the ops sergeant, has done this, this, and this. Your warrant officer has done. So what you need to do is you need to stop thinking you're in charge and listen to what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes they'll say stupid stuff, but you got to be the mentor for that. You got to say, we're not doing that. Or if you got a real bad question, come see me. I'll help you sort through it, or my sergeant major will. And you had to teach these guys that. There were a couple officers that I had to let go of because they had that attitude. One of them, if there was a Rambo knife out for sale, he bought it.
Mm-hmm.
We would go to the field, and he'd have these special high-tech Hummer boots on that had the tread that was unique. And one time I went out in the field, and they were out there, and I saw his boot print, and I followed them into their campsite. I said, how'd you go? How'd you find us? I said, your stupid boots. That's a unique print. I've also seen officers, and fortunately I knew them, who did that. All right, Team Sergeant, I got you. I'm in charge here. And a few months later, you saw them signing out of the unit.
Is there a way, though, that, because officers, obviously, because they've done a tour with a regular unit where they are in charge a lot of times, and then they come to a unique place like SF where how do you get them aside, how do you sort of bring them on and say, look, you are the officer, like the responsibility and authority is ultimately with you, but these guys know what they're doing and you can learn from that.
I'll tell you how I did it. Just like you just said it. I made sure they knew the qualifications that their team sergeant and some of the guys on their team had.
Yeah.
And I let them know, hey, this guy's been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah.
You've been doing it for 6 months.
Right.
Listen to him. He's going to tell you what to do, how to do it. If you get confused, come see me. We'll help you.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I've seen officers who get there and they come in because they're going to make their mark.
Uh-huh.
All right, all you stupid NCOs, you don't know nothing. I went to college, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to do.
Right. Yeah. And then what about the mentorship and the alliances? Because for, friends of that, the officer who gave you the bad NCOR, for his friends to come to you and say, they definitely were, whether they were putting themselves professionally at risk, they were certainly sort of putting themselves personally, the friendship-wise, at risk. How is it for officers, whether it's working with seniors or juniors or whatever, to to create that same sort of camaraderie instead of an era of competition?
That's a personal decision that everybody has to make.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with guys who were extremely competitive, and they would tell me, "Oh, you did this. You did it for 6 weeks. I'm gonna take guys in. We're gonna do it for 8 weeks."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fine with me. Because it kills their people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to worry about your people.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about it is this: officers go to a team for 1 to 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Enlisted guys are on the team for their whole career.
Mm-hmm.
So if I start burning the candle at both ends, the enlisted guy's going to get burned out pretty quick, and the officer's going to be gone somewhere else.
Yeah.
And people have to understand that.
So you've gotten into a number of different things in, retirement years. And you were telling me that you've been recognized for some of your work, kind of passing that on, mentoring others. What are some of those endeavors you've gotten involved in?
Mostly mentoring is my biggest one. I feel that I've been successful. I feel that I have a lot of knowledge, and I take that knowledge and I try to spread it. And especially even today, a lot of young officers call me because they've read the paper I wrote in the War College. And they thank me. They say, sir, I want to thank you for writing that paper. I read it. It saved my life, et cetera, et cetera. That's what makes you feel good. You've helped someone become successful.
And do you want to tell us about Black Ops?
Yeah. Black Ops was started by a gentleman named Ruben Ayala. And what he does is with Black Ops, he takes the stories of Black Special Forces, Rangers, Marine Force Recon, SEALs, and Latinos and females. And he brings those stories to the forefront. And I'll give you an example. One of the guys I used to be work for me was a Sante Raider. And everybody knew it. Everybody talked about it. And I found out another guy I knew was also a Sante Raider. He was Black. And nobody ever said anything about him. And I asked an old retired Sergeant Major Graham, I said, hey, Sergeant Major, this guy was a Sante Raider? He said, yes, sir. You didn't know that? No. There are things people don't talk about. So what Black Ops does is tries to take these people and bring them up to the forefront so everybody can see. So like Ruben said, he watched Arnold Schwarzenegger and Rambo and all this kind of stuff, but he never saw any Latinos doing that. Now you have kids out there who are very impressionable. For them to want to go and be special forces, it would help if they saw somebody who was in special forces, who was successful, who looked like they did. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I was in special forces, many, many times I was the lone Black officer. And then when I wasn't the lone, I was the senior Black officer. Remember now, I'm just growing up just like these other guys are. So he felt that it was important for people, everybody, to see that there are minorities in special forces, whether you're Black, Latin, Asian, or whatever. There are females in special ops. You too can strive for this. Now, the Black Ops, they say it's a platform created for the purpose of telling uncommon stories through film, podcasting, and documentaries.
And where can people find it? If they search.
Um, that's a very interesting story. It's on YouTube. Type in Black Ops. They are looking at, let me see something here. They have a road show that they've done. They've done one in Atlanta. They've done one here in Tampa. They've done them in Ohio and other places. And they have this platform called blackops.tv. It's a streaming platform that's dedicated to telling the stories.
Is there anything else that you've been working on that you'd like to tell folks about?
Yeah. Being a better person. When you've done everything that I've done and being soldiers, especially special forces guys, we never want to admit that we have weaknesses. And we do. And the biggest thing you have to do as a special forces soldier is say, you know what? I might need some help with this. And get it.
And what shape or form did that take for you as a gentleman who's retired now? And
my wife, I always tell everybody she's my heartbeat. My wife told me that I had PTSD. And nobody else had ever said I had PTSD. My wife told me. And of course, I was looking for that river in Egypt, denial. And I wouldn't admit it. And finally, I went to with her pushing, I went to the doctor and said, I think I might have PTSD. And they did the little test, and he came back. And you know what the doctor told me? Yeah, buddy, you got PTSD. But once you get diagnosed with it, you have to fix it. Sometimes you can fix it yourself. Sometimes you need help fixing it. We, Special Forces guys, used to look down on anybody that we considered weak. And if you thought you had a mental issue or something's going on with your family, blah, 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 and you couldn't handle it, you were just weak. But that is not a weakness. That is a strength when you realize that you have an issue and fix it.
What were some of the therapies that worked for you to fix it?
The biggest one for me was my wife, talking to her. My wife wanted to be a psychologist at one point in time, but she left that and she took another route. And she's very, very intelligent. She's doing a lot of things now. She's one of the smartest humans that I know, smarter than me, even though she won't admit that. But she's the one. And she, as they say, she talked me off that ladder several times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think communication is her greatest asset. And I'm happy. If it wasn't for her, I might not be here.
I mean, Remo, we've covered a lot here in a relatively short period of time, considering how extensive your career is. Is there anything else that I left out or that you wish I asked that you'd like to talk about before we get going tonight?
I know. I'm really hurt that my Ranger buddy never asked me if I have any experience with the Rangers.
Did you have experience with Rangers? And was it
funny you asked that. I was the Merle's Marauder Award winner in my Ranger course.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I still got the compass.
Yeah.
What was your Ranger school number?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Come on. I was just gonna, bust your balls if you went to the last hard class, which I imagine you did.
I did. It was 1977.
Yeah, that was probably the last hard class.
And I'll tell you, the worst thing for me at Ranger school was I left 3-7 in Panama to go to Ranger school. And all the RIs knew I was a Special Forces guy. So I was called Special Feces, Special Fools, all those cute names.
That's funny. So they still had desert phase back then too, huh?
I did not go through the desert phase.
Oh, okay. All right, they got rid of it. Yeah.
The other three phases, the city phase, Florida phase, and the mountain phase, that was plenty.
Yeah, for sure.
Remo, are you still thinking about potentially writing a book?
I am not only thinking about it, I'm going to. And I'll tell you why. My son, for Father's Day, he gave me this little book. And he put a note on it. And it said, Dad, I really don't know much about what you did in the military and your life. And this book he gave me asked questions about you. And I started writing. And some of the stuff I was writing surprised me. So at that point in time, and by the way, my wife has told me I should write a book too, and several other people. So I've decided that I'm going to start writing a book.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's great. Record some of this history down.
Yeah.
Remo, where can people go to find you? I don't know if you're still consulting or not, but if they even want to, they're interested in some of these like mentoring or speaking events, where can people go to find you?
Right here.
They should show up at your house and ring the doorbell.
I have my phone number.
No, don't give that.
You don't have to give that.
Yeah, don't give that out.
But
are you
or email me?
Do you want to give out your email? Like, are you okay with the public having that?
Yeah, I don't care.
Okay, go ahead and let folks know where they can find you.
My email address is REMOBTL, the number 8 at AOL.com.
Great. There you go. You can go talk to the man himself. Remo, thank you so much for doing this interview and speaking with us for a couple hours.
Hey, just my pleasure. Enjoyed it. It was great. And, Rangers lead the way.
Do we have any questions, Steve? Okay, no questions. We're all good. Okay, Remo, thank you, man. And have a good night.
Ciao.
Take care, man. Hey guys, it's Jack. I just want to talk to you for a moment about how you can support the show if you've been watching it, enjoying it, but you'd like to get a little bit more involved and help us continue to do this. You can check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/theteamhouse. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all of these episodes of the Team House ad-free. The same goes with our affiliated podcast, Eyes On, with Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy. That one, you will also get all of those episodes ad-free. And you support the channel and the show, and we really appreciate it. The Patreon members are literally what has helped this company, this small business survive, especially during our early years. And you are what continues to help this thing going, even as we navigate the turbulent world of YouTube advertising. So we really appreciate all of you guys. There's going to be a link down in the description to that Patreon page, and there is also going to be a link to our new merch shop. So if you guys want to go and get some Team House merchandise, we got stickers, and we also have patches. And I should mention, if you sign up for Patreon at $10 a month, we will mail you this patch as well. So we really appreciate that. But they're also for sale on the merch shop. And additionally, they got t-shirts up there, water bottles, a tote bag, coffee mugs, all that good stuff. So please go and check them out and support the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.